The Valkyrie archetype is a series of female light fairy monsters and 2 wind fairy monsters originally used by Siegfried von Schroeder in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime, which debuted in the TCG exclusive booster pack Shadows in Valhalla. The archetype received several new members and further supports in Savage Strike and Dark Neostorm. The concept of the Valkyrie cards is derived from Valkyries of Norse mythology. Like most of Siegfried's cards, the Valkyrie cards are named after characters from the opera Der Ring der Nibelungen. Despite being based on the same mythology, this archetype has no relation to the Nordic archetype. The Valkyries are armoured female monsters of varying ages and hair colours. Each of them wields a sword and shield and is accompanied by a white stallion corresponding to her own age. The 2 eldest and most powerful of the Valkyries, Erda and Brunhilde, also wear elaborate helmets to signify their rank. In the Japanese anime, the Valkyries are called Warukure, from German Walkür. Many of them have their own names derived from German. The German and Italian names of some of the Valkyries simply translate to 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th Valkyrie. There are some issues regarding the archetype's name in the TCG, mostly because it wasn't released in the OCG first. Thus, despite the fact it was not released in Japan, according to recent erratas, Element Valkyrie and Valkyrie of the Nordic Ascendant are not considered Valkyrie monsters, and a new archetype condition was introduced to exclude them. Also in the French, Italian, Portuguese, and Spanish versions, the archetype's name contains a hyphen to exclude all cards that have Valkyria or Valkyrian in their English names that have been released prior to realization of this archetype in the TCG, including Dark Valkyria, Power Angel Valkyria, Magician's Valkyria, and Valkyrian Knight. This is necessary because the English Valkyria and Valkyrian have been translated to the only words for Valkyrie in these languages. The hyphen is only used in the names of Valkyrie monsters, in whose cases the hyphenated archetype names function as prefixes. Therefore, an archetype condition is added to the card text of Ride of the Valkyries to include it in the archetype in these languages. These aren't issues with the German names because translations for Valkyrie, Walkür, and Valkyria, Valkyrian, Valriska are sufficiently distinct. The effects of the Valkyrie cards vary slightly, but usually revolve around special summoning. Valkyrie monsters pinpoint removal of opposing monsters and increasing their own attacks. The deck sticks foremost to the all-or-nothing tactic of using Ride of the Valkyries from the anime to perform an OTK as soon as possible. The first 3 Valkyrie monsters work in tandem to clear the field and enable their attack-raising effects, while the last 3 Valkyrie monsters help with more search power and swarming. As a side strategy, the deck also focuses on controlling the opponent's draw and disrupting field presence by banishing and rearranging the opponent's deck, as well as banishing cards from the field and from the graveyard. Brunhilde is the ace of the monster lineup in terms of attack points. Its main role is to punish swarming by increasing its attack to surprising heights depending on deck matchup, as well as giving the other Valkyrie monsters immunity to battle destruction. Its immunity against opposing spell effects can come in handy against certain troublesome cards or whole decks, for example Lair of Darkness, Lost World, and Zombie World, as well as generic cards such as Book of Moon, Raigeki, and Skystruck and Maneuver Afterburners. Valkyrie Erda is the second boss monster of the archetype. She helps weakening the opponent's monsters while also banishing all the destroyed cards that would be sent to the opponent's graveyard. Mischief of the Time Goddess is the objectively most dangerous spell card in their strategy, and that which they rely on, as it not only gives the player an additional battle phase, but it also bypasses the negative effect of Ride of the Valkyries. Also, it could allow cards like Where Art Thou, Into the Void, and Celestial Transformation to be played safely, bypassing the damage, mass, discard, or destruction effects during the end phase. As it skips a whole turn, it is possible to activate trap cards shortly after being set, get 1 additional normal summon during main phase 2, and reset once per turn effects. Foolish Burial of Goods is also a good tech option to send this card to the graveyard so that you can recover it with Valkyrie Ursht. Valkyrie Dritter is the deck's main searcher, as she can add any Valkyrie card to your hand, so some builds run a few copies of Condemned Witch, as it can special summon her straight from the deck, granting her search effect, while also being a good search card for herself for the forbidden quick play spells. While her base attack of 1000 seems quite low, she can boost herself by 200 attack for each of your opponent's banished monsters. Valkyrie Sesh can provide more swarming once special summoned, as she can summon any Valkyrie out of your deck. Therefore, she is the primary target for effects that let you special summon a monster 1-for-1, Monster Reborn, Final Light, Celestial Transformation, etc. As she can build up your board with her additional special summon, however, its mill effect can be more of a hindrance than a help against many decks, but there are cases where it can be handy to get more monsters in your opponent's graveyard to banish them with Ursht or Apple of Enlightenment. Furthermore, Valkyrie Vierte can help by adding a normal spell or trap card to the hand, like Raigeki, Monster Reborn, Final Light, Apple of Enlightenment, Valkyrie's Embrace, Pegasus Wing, or simply Ride. Once she is destroyed by battle, she can special summon any Valkyrie monster from the deck. Valkyrie acts both as a booster and as an archetypal Foolish Burial of Goods, as she can boost all the Valkyries by 200 attack points for each of the opponent's banished monsters, and can send from the deck to the graveyard any spells or traps. A common strategy would be to send a Goddess Skuld's Oracle to the graveyard and retrieve it once Valkyrie is right battles, so it can be reactivated in main phase 2 to search for the other goddesses. You can also retrieve other continuous spells like Valhalla, Hall of the Fallen, or Constellar Belt this way, or even send traps like Lost Wind and Rise to Full Height to the graveyard to activate their effects. Valkyrie Urda weakens all the opponent's monsters by 1000 attack points when that's special summoned with a Valkyrie card, commonly Valkyrie Shesht or Ride of the Valkyries, or with Vierte in less common cases. Furthermore, it acts as an opponent's unique Macrocosmos, as she banishes every destroyed card that would be sent to the opponent's graveyard, resulting in a high attack boost with Fount and or Verdrit. Despite being commonly perceived as an OTK one-turn kill deck, Valkyrie monsters usually lack the necessary brute strength to perform one-turn kills consistently. Because of this, supportive cards such as Valkyrie's Embrace, Pegasus Wing, Valkyrie Chariot, and Fortune Chariot can be really useful. Embrace helps removing strong monsters from the opponent's field by banishing them. While this usually comes in handy, it also triggers Drits and Fonts boosting effects, while Pegasus Wing allows Valkyries to attack directly by simply having a union monster, usually one of the two chariots, in the graveyard. This is easily achievable since Valkyrie Vierte can easily mill the deck. Alternatively, running a Foolish Burial is a safe way to mill one of those union monsters. At the same time, Valkyrie Chariot boosts a Valkyrie's attack by 500, which can accumulate whenever she attacks, and effectively protects the equipped Valkyrie from destruction by sacrificing itself, while Fortune Chariot lets the equipped Valkyrie perform a direct attack. Alternatively, you can simply rely on cards like Honest to get over high attack targets, as the Chariot monsters are wind attribute monsters, while all Valkyries are light, therefore making the Chariots prone to floodgates like Gozen Match. As a further help, it's important to run strong cards that allow the player to easily crack the opponent's board. Therefore, running cards like Lightning Storm, Dark Hole, Raigeki, and Dark Ruler No More is crucial for the deck. As the deck can still be vulnerable to battle traps like the Mirror Force cards and its counterparts, a standard option is to tech in cards like Twin Twisters and Hey Trunade to get rid of problematic back row cards. It's worth noting that you can banish opponent's back row cards when using Twin Twister or other cards that destroy them while controlling Valkyrie Urda. This deck doesn't rely too much on the extra deck, as the OTK strategy means the player is trying to finish off the opponent with the Valkyries themselves, and as a result, Positive Extravagance for extra draw power is a common choice, as losing 3 to 6 extra deck monsters does not negatively affect the deck. The three goddesses Skuld, Verdande, and Urd can have a supportive role by preemptively banishing dangerous cards the opponent could have drawn, while protecting the Valkyries from being targeted and destroyed by opposing card effects. This also creates an opportunity for the player to use cards like Conscription, Mind Crush, and Command of Swords. They also are a strong tool to summon Valkyrie Sigrun, a level 9 Valkyrie that allows to special summon any level 8 or lower Valkyrie from the hand or graveyard. As a last resort, they can be used to summon Hamon, Lord of Striking Thunder, or Dragon Queen of Tragic Endings. As an additional tech, their power can be combined with Valkyrie Sesh. Second effect, by doing so, the player can freely choose what to banish and what to send to the graveyard, giving almost total control over the opponent's deck. Logi's Flame and Valkyrie Urda also support the Goddess's strategy by decreasing the opponent's strength and also stalling for time. Additionally, Logi's Flame can summon any level 5 or higher Valkyrie from the hand or deck when destroyed, opening up for disruption plays, Ursht or Zweit, or defensive plays with Brunhild. To compensate the lack of searching power in the archetype, Generation Shift can be a good option to continuously add Valkyrie Dwight to the hand while also charging the graveyard for possible future plays. Finally, Reasoning can be a very good card for this archetype, since all the Valkyrie monsters but the Union monsters have different levels. Because of this, the chances of getting a free special summon while also charging the graveyard are very high. Charging the graveyard and milling the deck is very important and combos well with Final Light. This card acts like an archetypal soul charge and can be effectively used to swarm that field or to easily link summon strong monsters like Borosaur Dragon. As a downside, the opponent can also special summon monsters with 2000 attack or less from his graveyard, equal to the number of Valkyrie monsters special summoned by this effect. However, this can be more helpful than it appears to be, as Brunhild gets a boost depending on how many monsters the opponent controls. Schwert can automatically destroy one of them if summoned, can banish them instead of sending them to the graveyard, while also triggering the boosting effect of Thump or Drit. Finally, Apple of Enlightenment can be used to preventatively banish monsters from the opponent's graveyard. The deck fails in not having a more intricate gameplay, gambling in an all-out strategy in order to finish the game as soon as possible, in a reminiscence of the feared Siegfried strategy in the anime. The deck also suffers from several problems that have plagued similar anime-inspired decks, with most of its cards lacking serious synergy and underwhelming in power level. The Goddess continuous spells, while powerful, don't really fit with the rest of the deck's OTK strategy, and are more suited to a longer duel, where the rest of the deck's inadequacies become more and more prevalent. Many of its long-term plans are also based on a mill control type strategy, hopeless in the modern era of graveyard effects and recursion. That said, the main line of the deck can be vulnerable to cards that prevent them from conducting the battle phase or attacking, such as Threatening Roar or Battle Fader. Despite the protection given by Goddess Erd's verdict, they are still vulnerable to cards like Quaking Mirror Force, Drowning Mirror Force, Floodgate Trap Hole, etc. This fast-paced strategy also renders them vulnerable to cards like Anti-Spell Fragrance and Imperial Order, which can be fatal to the deck, postponing the activation of key cards such as Ride of the Valkyries and Mischief of the Time Goddess. Indeed, simply negating Ride is normally enough to stop the Valkyrie strategy cold. Fortune Chariot is a wind attribute fairy type union effect monster. It's a level 6 with 1000 attack and 2000 defense. This card is also always treated as a Valkyrie card. Once per turn, you can either target one fairy monster you control, equip this card to that target, or unequip this card and special summon it. If the equipped monster would be destroyed by battle or card effect, destroy this card instead. The equipped monster can attack directly, but when it does so using this effect, the battle damage inflicted to your opponent is halved. Firstly, in order to equip this card, you're going to have to do so from the field, so you are going to have to tribute a monster as this is a level 6. It would have been preferable to be a level 4, as that way it's more justifiable for it. Or you can also unequip this card. If the equipped monster would be destroyed by battle or card effect, you destroy this card instead. That applies to all of the other Union monsters. They have the very same effect, and the equipped monster gets to battle the opponent directly, but it does half the damage, so you're not even getting too much of an effect from this ability. It's not overall that good of a card, and I would not recommend kind of running these unless you've got some sort of alternative strategy or something in the future actually makes this card consistent. Valkyrie Brunhild is a light attribute fairy type level 7 with 1800 attack and 2000 defense. It's unaffected by your opponent's spell effects, and it gains 500 attack for each monster your opponent controls. When an opponent's monster declares an attack, you can have this card lose exactly 1000 defense, and if you do, your Valkyrie monsters cannot be destroyed by battle this turn. This is seen as one of the several boss monsters within the archetype. It is a level 7, so it does need 2 tributes to bring it out, and for a level 7 with only 1800 attack points, it is quite weak. It does have the immunity from being destroyed or being affected by your opponent's spell effects. It's still affected by your own, so you do have that level of advantage if you want to run, for example, equip spells for it. And it gains 500 attack for each monster your opponent controls on the field. So the more cards they have, the more powerful this card becomes. If an opponent's monster declares an attack, by having this card lose exactly 1000 defense points, all of your Valkyrie monsters for that turn cannot be destroyed by battle, so it does provide a level of protection. This effect can work twice, as it has 2000 defense points, but if you can boost its defense higher, then obviously it can use its effect multiple times over, but you'd have to dedicate a strategy towards that. Valkyrie Chariot is a wind attribute fairy type union effect monster. It's a level 3 with 500 attack and 1000 defense. Once per turn, you can either target one fairy monster you control, equip this card to that target, or unequip this card and special summon it. If the equipped monster would be destroyed by battle or card effect, destroy this card instead. When the equipped monster declares an attack, you can have it gain 500 attack. This attack gain remains even if this card leaves the field. This is a decent consistent boost, as the attack boost is permanent so long as that monster remains face up on the field. It does require itself to be summoned as well in order to use this effect, and so if it could have summoned itself by special summoning whilst you have a Valkyrie, it would be much better. And as it is, it can generate 500 attack points each and every time your Valkyrie monsters are involved in battles, whether it's you attacking with that Valkyrie monster or whether your opponent is attacking into your Valkyrie monster. It does also have that level of protection that equipped monsters have, but again, I just think it should have been an ability to special summon itself or another card which lets this card be special summoned to the field. Valkyrie Dritter is a light attribute fairy type level 4 with 1000 attack and 1600 defense. If this card is normal or special summoned, you can add one Valkyrie card from your deck to your hand, except Valkyrie Dritter. You can only use this effect of Valkyrie Dritter in one turn. It gains 200 attack for each of your opponent's banished monsters. This card is very much a rotor for the deck, for the Valkyrie archetype. As soon as it's either normal or special summoned, you can just add a Valkyrie card. It doesn't matter if it's a spell, a monster, or a trap card, from the deck to the hand, and it also gains 200 attack for each of your opponent's banished monsters, so the more of them are banished, the more powerful this card becomes. Valkyrie Urda is a light attribute fairy type level 8 with 2000 attack and 2200 defense. You can only control one Valkyrie Urda. While you control this card, special summoned by the effect of a Valkyrie card, all face-up monsters your opponent controls lose 1000 attack points. Any card destroyed by battle or card effect that will be sent to your opponent's graveyard is banished instead. This is another one of the 3 boss monsters. It is a level 8, so it does need quite an investment into it to tribute 2 monsters to bring it out. You're also limited to only bringing one of this card out. If this card happens to have been special summoned by a Valkyrie card, then all of your opponent's face-up monsters lose 1000 attack points. That's quite useful to protecting your own monsters. And any card destroyed by battle or card effect is going to be banished instead of being sent to the graveyard. The only downside I'd say is there is no real incentive for you to just tribute this card out, outside of it being like a walking macrocosmos for your opponent's cards, and I would rather be able to get the attack suppression based effect as well to make it more consistent. Valkyrie Ursht is a light attribute fairy type level 6 with 1600 attack and 1800 defense. If this card is special summoned from your hand by a spell effect, you can target one Mischief of the Time Goddess in your graveyard and add it to your hand. If you control a Valkyrie monster other than Valkyrie Ursht, as a quick effect you can banish one monster from your opponent's graveyard. Then this card's attack becomes equal to the banished monster's original attack until the end of this turn. You can only use each effect of Valkyrie Ursht once per turn. This card is relatively easy to summon, as, there are multiple ways of bringing this card out. It is a level 6, so I think that's a bit much, as it only has 1600 attack points. But if this card is special summoned by a spell effect, such as Ride of the Valkyries, you can recover your Mischief of the Time Goddess from your graveyard, and it comes back to the hand. So long as you've got a different Valkyrie monster on the field as a quick effect, so this can be activated during yours and your opponent's turn, by banishing a monster from your opponent's graveyard, this card attack becomes equal to that monster's, so that's perfect, as it's a way of kind of ripping away your opponent's cards without them being able to recover them, unless they've got a set strategy that relies on banished monsters. Valkyrie Funft is a light attribute fairy type level 2 with 800 attack and 1200 defense. Its effect is Valkyrie monsters you control gain 200 attack for each of your opponent's banished monsters. If you control a Valkyrie monster other than Valkyrie Funft, you can send one spell or trap card from your deck to the graveyard. You can only use this effect of Valkyrie Front once per turn. This is a card which is meant to support your Valkyrie monsters in that all of your monsters gain at 200 attack for each of your opponent's banished monsters. The more of them that are banished, the more overall each of your monsters is going to gain additional attack points. So long as you have other Valkyrie monsters, you're able to send a spell or trap card from your deck to the graveyard, which can hopefully either be pitched in order to recover from the graveyard, or if it's got a graveyard-based effect, then that effect can then be triggered off in that same turn. Or the following turn, if it's got one of those restrictions, it cannot be activated during the turn it's sent to the graveyard. Valkyrie Seshed is a light attribute fairy type level 1 with 0 attack and 2000 defense. If this card is special summoned, you can special summon one monster from your deck except Valkyrie Seshed. During your main phase, you can send the top 2 cards of your opponent's deck to the graveyard. You can only use each effect of Valkyrie Seshed once per turn. The conditions on this card aren't too bad. It's a level 1, it's 0 attack, 2000 defense is quite decent. But if this card happens to be special summoned, you can just instantly special summon a Valkyrie monster from your deck, except a copy of itself. This would be perfect to bring out, for example, any of the Urda, which could then trigger off its effect to reduce your opponent's attack points by 1000 points, or the Brunhild, which can help protect your other Valkyrie monsters. This does also have the ability to send 2 cards from the top of your opponent's deck to the graveyard. The benefit of that is if you've got other cards which can then banish those cards from the graveyard, then you're most likely not going to have to deal with those. But if any of them have effects that when they're sent to the graveyard trigger off, or if you can't get those cards banished in time, your opponent is likely to be able to play around this and use those cards to their advantage, because it will at least deck thin for them. Valkyrie Sigrun is a light attribute fairy type level 9 with 2200 attack and a 2400 defense. If this card is in your hand, you can target one face-up spell or trap card you control, send it to the graveyard, and if you do, special summon this card. If this card is normal or special summoned, you can special summon one at level 8 or Valkyrie monster from your hand or graveyard. You can only use each effect of Valkyrie Sigrun once per turn. This is the final monster, which is almost considered like their boss monster. This is able to instantly special summon itself, provided you have a face-up spell or trap card on your field, and the 3 goddess cards are all face-up continuous spell cards. Send any of those to the graveyard, you can just bring this card out pretty easily within its own archetype. Once this card is normal or special summoned, you can instantly special summon a level 8 or Valkyrie monster from the hand or graveyard, so you can either bring out the Urda or any of the other monsters. You can bring out the Seshed, which can then bring out the Urda from the deck if that's an option you want to choose. It really isn't that powerful of a card, although it does have a revival ability to it. I just wish it would have had more to make it a bit more lively as a quote-unquote boss monster. Valkyrie Vierte is a light attribute fairy type level 3 with 1400 attack and 1400 defense. During your main phase, you can activate the top cards of your deck equal to the number of other Valkyrie monsters you control, and if you do, add 1 excavated normal spell or trap card to your hand. Also send the remaining cards to the graveyard. Otherwise, shuffle all excavated cards into the deck. When this card is destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, you can special summon 1 Valkyrie monster from your deck. You can only use each effect of Valkyrie Vierte once per turn. When this card is just on the field as it is, just by excavating the top cards equal to the number of other Valkyrie monsters, it helps you to search for a normal spell or trap card. That's beneficial, but it does send the other cards back to the graveyard. If you can't find any normal spell or trap cards, then it just shuffles all of those cards back into the deck. It's useful for searching out for certain cards if you need them, depending on the situation. And if this card happens to be destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, you can go into, for example, the Valkyrie Seshed, who can then special summon the Valkyrie from the deck straight onto the field and then apply its 1000 attack point reduction effect, or whatever you're needing to get for that time. Maybe it's better you get the Dritte out, which can then search for any of the Valkyrie cards. Valkyrie White is a light attribute fairy type level 5 with 1600 attack and defense. If this card is summoned, you can target 1 monster your opponent controls and destroy it. After damage calculation, if this card battled, you can target 1 continuous spell in your graveyard, add it to your hand. You can only use each effect of Valkyrie White once per turn. This card is useful if you are trying to destroy or remove your opponent's cards. It is a level 5 monster, which means it does need a tribute to bring it out, but the effect of destroying an opponent's monster is activated at any point it's summoned. So it could be special summoned from the graveyard, it could be summoned from the hand onto the field, it could be special summoned at any point, and it would still all be able to do that. Once this card has battled, this is able to recover a continuous spell in your graveyard back to the hand, so you have the 3 goddess cards, the Erd, the Redundant, and the Oracle, so those are all useful. And you can also combine this deck with other continuous spells to make this card more worth your while running. Ride of the Valkyries is a normal spell card. Special summon any number of Valkyrie monsters with different names from your hand. If you special summon 3 or more monsters with this effect, you take no battle damage until the end of the next turn. During the end phase of the turn you activated this card, shuffle all monsters you control into the deck. You can banish this card from your graveyard and add 1 Mischief of the Time Goddess from your deck to your hand. You can only use this effect of Ride of the Valkyries once per turn. This manages to bypass a lot of the weakness of the Valkyrie monsters, as a lot of them are level 5, 6, 7, 8 or 9, so they require tributes or very special circumstances to typically bring them out. This completely removes that limitation on them. If you happen to special summon 3 or more monsters, you are also able to protect yourself from taking any battle damage until the end of your opponent's next turn. So that's until their end phase really happens, until your next standby phase. When this is activated during the end phase, you would typically have to shuffle all monsters you control into the deck. But if you happen to have Mischief of the Time Goddess and can skip this, then you can negate that downside of the effect. It also benefits by being able to banish itself to search for an additional Mischief of the Time Goddess from the deck to the hand. Valkyrie's Embrace is a normal spell card. The effect is of all monsters you control are Valkyrie monsters, target 1 attack position Valkyrie monster you control, and 1 face-up monster your opponent controls. Change your monster's defense position, and if you do, banish that opponent's monster. You cannot special summon monsters the turn you activate this card, except Valkyrie monsters. You can only activate 1 Valkyrie's Embrace per turn. This is an alternative way for you to get rid of your opponent's monsters. I know you have the whole strategy around the 3 continuous spell cards, but the problem with those cards specifically is that you pretty much have to have all 3 of those on the field to guarantee that you're banishing the card. Because think of it this way, the first one basically looks at the top 3 cards and lets you arrange those cards on whichever order you want. The second one, you have to guess the type of the card that is going to be kind of set, and then it gets set to the field. And the third ability is you have to actually name the specific card. So realistically, you could probably do first and second effects maybe with less of a gamble. But third effect, definitely, even if you knew the type of deck they were running, chances for you getting 100% spot on without the other 2 cards and knowing exactly what that card is, it's highly unlikely to happen. This is just an alternative way of kind of getting rid of your opponent's troublesome cards. It does come at the cost of changing one of your monsters to defense position, but it's a very limited cost, and it can be searched through the effect of Valkyrie Dritte. Apple of Enlightenment is a normal trap card. Its effect is to target cards in your opponent's graveyard up to the number of Valkyrie monsters you control. Banish them. If this set card in its owner's control has left the field because of an opponent's effect, and is now in the graveyard or banished, you can draw cards equal to the number of monsters you control plus 1. This card has an ability to banish a number of cards up to the Valkyrie monster you control, so that's fine, as it's a way of kind of preventing them from running anything. But the downside of this is, you know, at maximum you can get 5, but more realistically you're going to banish it 2 to 3. And if this set card has left the field because of an opponent's effect, you're able to just draw cards equal to the number of Valkyrie monsters you have, plus 1, so that's beneficial. It's a shame you can't use both effects. I would have preferred if, for example, the second part of the effect was actually that you could banish this card from your graveyard to help draw into cards, as that way, you know, the Valkyrie archetype isn't broken. why not give them a little bit of a fighting chance to be reliant on with maybe some more dedicated spell and trap support. Final Light is a normal spell card. Its effect is to pay life points in multiples of 1,000, then target one Valkyrie monster in your graveyard with a different name for every 1,000 life points paid. Special summon them, then your opponent can special summon monsters with 2,000 or less attack from their graveyard up to the number of monsters you special summoned by this effect. You can only activate one Final Light per turn. This is a bit like Soul Charge for the Valkyrie archetype. It does require you to pay life points in multiples of 1,000, so depending on your situation and how many life points you've got will determine how many monsters you can bring out, as well as how many Valkyrie monsters you have in the first place in your graveyard that happen to have different names. The more you can kind of bring out, the better you've got some sort of advantage, but also consider that your opponent is able to special summon monsters from their graveyard. The only kind of saving grace to that is that they're limited to bring out monsters with 2,000 or less attack points, so it's not like they can bring out all of their past extra deck monsters that have sent to the graveyard that can then break your board. You can actually probably, if you play this card well, be able to deal with the cards that they revive, maybe hopefully even banish those cards if you can optimize your strategy. Goddess Skuld's Oracle is a continuous spell card. The effect is when this card is activated, if all monsters you control are Valkyrie monsters, minimum 1, you can add one Goddess Vidande's Guidance from your deck to your hand. Once per turn during your main phase, you can look at the top 3 cards of your opponent's deck, and if you do, place them on top of their deck in any order, but you cannot normal summon or special summon monsters for the rest of this turn, except fairy monsters. You can only activate one Goddess Skuld's Oracle per turn. This card, when can be activated, so long as you've got a Valkyrie monster, you can then search for the second of the 3 continuous spell cards, the Goddess Vidande's Guidance, from the deck to the hand. You are then able to determine the top 3 cards of your opponent's deck and determine the order in which you want them to be placed, and you are then locked into only fairy type monsters for the rest of the turn, but since that's how the deck relies upon, that isn't a concern. Goddess Vidande's Guidance is a continuous spell card. The effect is when this card is activated, if all monsters you control are Valkyrie monsters, minimum 1, you can add one Goddess Erd's Verdict from your deck to your hand. Once per turn, you can declare one type of card, monster, spell, or trap, reveal the top card of your opponent's deck, and if it was the declared type, they set it to their field. Otherwise, they add it to their hand. You can only activate one Goddess Vidande's Guidance per turn. With this card, it's actually quite useful in that if you've got the previous card to set everything up, you know exactly what type of card is coming up next that they draw, and then they just effectively set that card to their field. You do have to make sure that it is correct, otherwise you're punished because they just get to draw that card into the hand. Goddess Erd's Verdict is a continuous spell card. The effect is your opponent cannot target Valkyrie monsters you control with card effects, also they cannot be destroyed by your opponent's card effects. Once per turn, you can declare one card name, then target one set card your opponent controls, reveal the set card, and if it was the declared card, banish it. Otherwise, banish one card you control. This is the third and final piece of the continuous spell puzzle for the Goddess continuous spell cards. This grants your Valkyrie monsters the ability to be protected from effectively most types of cards, unless they have a mass destruction type of effect, like a mass wipeout effect that isn't just destruction. The final ability of this card, you do have to declare the exact name of the set card in order for you to banish that card. Otherwise, you are punished by having to banish one of the cards that you currently control. So there's a very high risk, high reward of this type of effect. Logi's Flame is a continuous trap card. Its effect is while you control a Valkyrie monster, monsters your opponent controls with 2,000 or less attack cannot attack. If this card is in your possession is destroyed by an opponent's card effect, you can special summon one level 5 or higher Valkyrie monster from your hand or deck. With this card, if you have the Valkyrie and its ability on the field, anything that has really less than 3,100 attack points is not going to be able to attack, as they will all turn to 2,000 or less attack points. If you can manage the strategy perfectly, then that works out. Even if your opponent gets frustrated with this and has the cards to out this card, they are then still going to be punished, as you can just straight away special summon a level 5 or higher Valkyrie monster from your hand or deck, which can then help support strengthening your field. Mischief of the Time Goddess is a quick play spell card. Neither player can activate cards or effects in response to this card's activation. It cannot be activated as Chain Link 2 or higher. At the end of your battle phase, if all monsters you control are Valkyrie monsters minimum 1, send this card to the graveyard. Also, immediately after this effect resolves, skip to the start of the phase of your next turn. If you do, you cannot activate Mischief of the Time Goddess until the end of that turn. The purpose of this card is, with the Valkyries, you want to do as much damage as possible, so you're able to attack twice. You have 2 battle phases across the 2 turns, and it completely skips your opponent's turn. This helps you to do a lot of damage, and it mitigates the problems of the Ride of the Valkyries, which skips your end phase, where all those monsters would have to be returned back to the deck. This deals with a lot of the problems. It is a hard once per turn effect, as otherwise, if you could imagine searching for a couple of these cards and then using these back to back, your opponent wouldn't have an ability to kind of fight back. Pegasus Wing is a normal spell card. Its effect is, if you have a union monster in your graveyard, target any number of monsters you control. Those monsters can attack directly this turn, but if they do so using this effect, their battle damage inflicted to your opponent is halved. This is a good way of getting additional damage in to your opponent, but you're going to have quite a few monsters on your field to benefit and to maximize the amount of damage you can do. You could pair this with some other cards like Robin Goblin or Robin Zombie to attack your opponent's hand or their deck, as each time Robin Goblin activates, it sends a random card from your hand to the graveyard, and Robin Zombie does the same, but it actually discards the top card of your opponent's deck for each time battle damage occurs. So if you can get 5 monsters, that's 5 cards from the hand, 5 cards from the deck. Whilst this card is not technically classified as a Valkyrie monster or Valkyrie archetype card, it is used often within the deck and actually suits the deck very well. This is Valhalla Hall of the Fallen. It's a continuous spell card with the effect, once per turn you can special summon 1 fairy monster from your hand. You must control no monsters to activate and to resolve this effect. Since all of the Valkyrie monsters are fairy type monsters, this works with each and every one of them. It synergizes with the highest attack one, as that one, the Sig run, requires you to send a face-up spell or trap card from the field to the graveyard to special summon it to use its effect. And so it's pretty simple to apply this to the deck. Overall, I think the cards within the archetype are quite good, and I think they're definitely usable. I just wish they had more support within the archetype. If any of you guys have any ideas or suggestions of how you made a better build of this deck, I currently have this running in Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel. I have most of the cards. I think I'm missing Ride of the Valkyries, Mischief of the Time Goddess, because those are, I think one's a secret rare, one's an ultra rare, and those weren't cards I was too focused on picking up. I picked up most of the other cards, it's just those 2 cards, and I'm kind of waiting until we receive the next lot of, when they give you access to the free rarity tickets when you kind of upgrade to level 100. That's what I'm waiting for before I can kind of upgrade that. As always, I'd love for you to subscribe to the channel, it really helps support it, and if you can watch either another video or to make sure to like the video, it helps to share it to more of an audience. Thank you.